advantages to be had from an educational institution, including helping to motivate staff. So you know that if you're in a classroom where the students are involved, they're interacting, they're all turning up, they're all doing the work, they're asking questions, it can make you feel better. You know when you've delivered a good session, you know when you've delivered a good coaching session, that people are involved. If you go in a classroom and they all sit there with their hands folded and they're not asking questions or whatever, it doesn't help motivate you. So having good student engagement can help the staff and motivate the staff too. It can help with teaching and learning. So we know that if you've got lots of debate going on or lots of people getting involved or group work or teamwork, it can help enhance teaching and learning. It can also help with marketing and promotion. If you've got students that are talking about your university, that Northumbria is a great place to go, the culture's really good, there's lots of opportunities, the staff are really nice, I feel as though I'm part of that university. If you've got students talking like that, it can help promote the university. So it can help with the branding and reputation, so that if our students go overseas and they're going to India on a placement, they're saying, oh, you should try Northumbria, look up Northumbria, etc., because they're really happy and they're really involved and they want to be part of us. And it can also help connections with industry. So industry can hear about you, that they want to get involved. They know that we've got good students who are engaged, who do really well, who get academic achievement, but go beyond that. So people start to come to you to say that, what's going on here, so it can help connections with industry too. So there's great benefits to be had to the educational institution. Next slide, please, Ganesh. And then the final advantages were that people said was that of society. So we can, as mentioned before, when we looked at the previous literature, we can have students, if you look at that first quote, they're more rounded individuals, students that succeed in life and do better for themselves and people. They become global citizens, they're open-minded and see everything as a learning opportunity. So this idea of global citizenship, well-rounded individuals, not just in it for themselves, they're in it for society, they want to give back. They might get involved in volunteering. There might be students that want to help the local community and wider society. This was a big aspect that we said if we've got students engaged, this can help society become a better place for everybody. So those were the major advantages: individual, educational institution, and also society gains as well. Next slide, please, Panesh. And then when we asked the students and staff about what were the barriers that stopped them being able to engage with their students. So the major barriers that staff suggested that stopped them engaging. Now this might hit home to some of you, so think about what stops you in your job being able to fully engage with your students. So the main thing that came out was linked to resources. So not enough resources. So at the moment, if you think about staffing, so the classroom sizes that you teach in or your coaching sessions, how many students are in the class? Is it 100? Is it 200? Is it more? Is it less? Would extra staff help you? No, it would in my situation. So if I'm teaching to a class of 200 students, it would be far better if I was teaching to a class of 50 students or 25 students. So lack of resources was a major barrier that stops staff being able to fully engage. And that's often linked to finance. But it can also be lack of resources with regard to space and time. There's just not enough hours in your week to be able to engage, or there's not enough space. If you've got 200 students and you've got to put on a coaching session in badminton, in hockey or whatever, have you got enough space to utilise to put them into a gym or to put them into an outdoor field, etc.? So resources was a major barrier for engaging fully with their staff. The second major barrier was operational. So again, this links to the size, the number of the students, but also worryingly was this concept of staff buy-in. So staff didn't feel as though it was their responsibility. They would put on a teaching class, but that was it. It was this lack of, engagement's not my job, it's somebody else's job. But there was also lack of awareness of engagement opportunities. So a lot of the academic staff didn't know what the professional support staff were putting on, whether that was health and wellbeing sessions, whether it was sports clubs, whether it was career events, etc. So this lack of awareness between the different staff areas was also identified as an issue. The third major barrier was that linked to processes and systems. So again, this links to lack of coordination. And what staff commented on was that often the hierarchy, the bosses, the people at the top of the organisation will make policies or suggestions of how we do things, but the teaching staff at the bottom of the organisation, at the operational side, it didn't work out. So the top staff would come up with all these ideas and policies that really you couldn't operationalise for whatever reason. So there was tension there between the big bosses and also the people that worked lower down who were delivering the teaching, the coaching, etc. And this concept of this centralised approach, that this one size fits all. So if they put on an event for nurses, it's very different to putting on an event for sports students, because sports students are very different to nursing students, are very different to engineering students. So this centralised idea and this strategic idea doesn't always work out. And this concept of having a standardised approach and treating every student as the same was a barrier, was a tension, because we know as good teachers, we know that all our students are different, they have different personalities, etc. And then the fourth barrier was that of students and customers. So you'll know that right around the world there's different concepts where people have to pay for tuition or education in some countries. In other countries it may be free. So this whole concept of students, are the students or are the customers? And there was a big debate there about, well, the students. So some academics said the students. So the students, I know what I'm talking about. I'm a teacher, I've got the PhD. The students, where other people suggested, well, the customers. And they, because they're paying an awful lot of money to be in our university, they have a right, they have a say about how we deliver, how we engage, etc. So this whole idea of students and customers and tensions was something that came out as a barrier too. And it comes back to the personality of the teaching staff. And how do they perceive engagement, and how important is it to you as a teacher or a coach to be able to engage with your students? And that comes down to individual personality. So those were the major barriers for the staff. Next slide, please, Banesh. And then when we asked the students, well, what are the barriers to you? What stops you getting involved in engaging? Whether it's in the classroom, whether it's joining clubs and societies, whether it's getting involved in volunteering, etc. So the major barriers that came out for the students were other commitments. So they had maybe children to look after. They may have to look after family, parents. They may have somebody that was ill in the family that they had to look after. Or also a lot of the students worked, so they had to balance this work and academia too. Another barrier that was interesting that came out was transitioning. So what is expected of your students when they enter your school, your college, your university? And this concept of anxiety, not quite knowing when you start, you know what it felt like when you started school or you went to a university on your first day. Were you anxious? Were you not quite sure what was expected? What was the university, what was the college expecting? So this was a perceived barrier. If students don't feel as though they know what's going on or what's expected, that was an interesting thing that came through. Size of the class. They didn't like large classes, they didn't like this blanket approach, it was difficult for them to interact. Learning difficulties. So we know that every student's different, but if you've got learning difficulties and you may have some different, whether it's different sides of not being able to interact or whatever, but learning difficulties can make you feel anxious or stop you being able to engage. Cultural differences. So we have a lot of international students in our university, so a language barrier can be a barrier to stopping students engage, but also intercultural differences. So how aware are we of intercultural skills? So an Indian student and their way of learning and studying might be very different to a Chinese student or to a student from the USA or to a... So all these things can be barriers, and great teachers know intercultural skills, and they'll know that there's many different ways of interacting, and there's many different ways of bringing your values and your belief systems and seeing that all those systems can work perfectly, but we just need to be aware of them. Dr. Usher, I'm aware that in the chat there's lots of people saying, can we translate? You just want to translate that or not? Dr. Usher?
या सो मैम बता रही थी कि बच्चों में क्या बाधाएं आ रही हैं एंगेजमेंट में। जब देखा जाए जो बच्चे पढ़ते हैं, जब वो पढ़ने के साथ साथ उनको और भी काम करनी पड़ती है, उनके और भी चीजों पे ध्यान देना पड़ता है, इसलिए कई बार जो
और कुछ दसना।
Okay. So staff buy-in, so the role of staff and what interests do you have with your students? So do you just turn up at a teaching session or a coaching session, put on the session and leave, and that's your hour done? Or have you got real interest in the students? Have you got real interest to know that Jack or Jane or Peter or Mary, you want them to reach their full potential? So this is all about the enthusiasm of the teaching staff. Lack of support. So another particular barrier that student mentioned was if they don't get much support from their family or important people to them. So how much support to the family, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, whether it's sisters, aunts, uncles, or whatever, do they get support? If they don't get support, it can be more difficult because students don't really know where they want to go in life or what they want to achieve. Also, this idea about being difficult to join in. So how easy is it for students to join in your institution, to join in your club that you're running, to join in a group piece of work? So we know that students that have got the shy or they've got an introvert personality, they can find it awkward. So how easy do we make and facilitate and coordinate it easy for students to join in whatever activities we're putting on? Another particular barrier was that of financial. So again, we mentioned this, that if it's expensive, if you put on a volunteering, if you put on a new club or a society, a badminton club after school, and there's a cost associated with that, does that stop some people from being able to join in? Going to university, we know that there's a cost. We know that it's expensive? Do students have access to loans? Do students have access to those financial opportunities to be able to go and join in those types of activities? Mental health issues. If you've got students that suffer from depression or anxiety or loneliness, that will stop them. That will be a perceived barrier that will stop them from being able to engage. And also lack of confidence and motivation. So if you've got people that are quite shy, timid, get anxious about new opportunities or new ways of working or joining a new college or university, lack of confidence and motivation will stop people from getting involved and engaging. So those were the major barriers then that we've identified from staff and also from students. Next slides, please, Pranesh. Now, this is a little bit difficult to see, but I'm sure you'll be able to access these slides and make it bigger yourself. But when we took the findings then from what we did for the first two studies, and then we did a big a big statistical analysis from the data, and we did some results that we did further analysis using quantitative survey to investigate the types of student engagement. So if you look at the blue column on the left-hand side, we looked at, well, what type of engagement activity did students do? Was it academic? Was it non-academic, etc.? Did they get involved in teamwork? Did they join clubs and societies? And we asked students to rate how high or low it was important to them to be involved in clubs, to be involved in volunteering, to be involved in society. And then we also looked at the role of the student. Were they proactive in engaging in those activities? And did they want to co-create? Did they want to work in partnership? We also looked at what were the advantages that were deemed important to them. And we looked at what are the barriers that stopped them engaging. So we did that on the left-hand side, and we looked at all the different aspects, and we did some cluster analysis and some factor analysis. And this table shows us that depending upon the value that they placed in each factor, we then undertook a cluster analysis to determine if we could put students into different types of groupings based upon how they answered these questions. So some students might want to go to university because they just wanted to participate in the clubs, the societies. That was more important. Whereas we might have another type of student that went to university because they wanted to get a degree, a first-class degree. They wanted to develop new skills, etc. So we did this big factor and cluster analysis, and we came up with four different types of student groupings that we could work with. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So the four different types of student typologies that we could say that this type of student we call a cognitive team player. This type of student would fall into this type of category, a badge wearer. The third type of student was an inquisitive learner, and the fourth type of student was a societal climber. And I'll explain what these different types of students look like and what their profile looked like. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So the cognitive team players were students who view highly cognitive and student team engagement. They were really interested in academic studies, they were cognitive thinkers, and they liked to work in teams to engage. There were students who wanted to challenge themselves academically and intellectually to undertake the best work they could and demonstrate to others that they had the ability to analyse, synthesise and apply theory to practice. So they were really the kind of intellectual students, the academic students that wanted to achieve high academic attainment. But they're also keen to work with other students, so they like teamwork if it was on academic matters. The main barriers to them with regards to engagement was poor student-tutor relationships. So they wanted to have really good relationships with the teachers. Other commitments and lack of social fit. They were the major barriers that they wanted to be involved with the teachers, but if they had other commitments, whether it was work or family, or if they didn't feel as though they fitted in, then that would be a perceived barrier. So those were the cognitive team players. Next slide, please, Vanessa.
Just a minute, Dr. Ruth, I'll just explain this. मैम ने अभी सर्वे लेने के बाद इनको 4 कैटेगरी में हमको डिवाइड किया बच्चों को। तो सबसे पहला था जो कॉग्निटिव टीम प्लेयर्स, माने संज्ञानात्मक जो टीम के खिलाड़ी है उनके बारे में। ये लोग ज्यादातर ये जो पढ़ाई में बहुत अच्छे हैं, अपने आप को बहुत बुद्धिमान समझते हैं, वो बच्चे इस कैटेगरी में आते हैं। तो क्योंकि वो बहुत जल्दी जो भी बताते हैं उसको सीख पाते हैं और सीख के उसको प्रैक्टिस सीख में लाके उसको वो इम्प्लीमेंट प्रैक्टिस भी कर पाते हैं। ये लोग कोशिश करते हैं कि ये लोग दूसरे बच्चों से एकेडमिक के मामले में अच्छा कर पाए। लेकिन इनको सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम ये कि ये दूसरे जो अध्यापक के साथ या औरों के साथ उनका जो मेल जोल है वो थोड़ा सा कम रहता है। वो सामाजिक तौर पे वो इतना अच्छी तरह से उनमें कमी पड़ती है। लेकिन ये लोग काफी बुद्धिमान है, कौशल है, लेकिन ये लोग बहुत जल्दी सीख पाते हैं। तो ये एक पर्टिकुलर कैटेगरी का आया है। ये एक ग्रुप है जो मैडम का सबसे पहले कैटेगरी था। यस मैम, थैंक्स।
Okay, thanks, Dr. Usher. Next slide, please, Dinesh. So the badge wearers then, the types of students that we would classify and call them that they're badge wearers. These were students that were mainly interested in non-academic engagement activities, such as volunteering or participating in sports clubs and societies. So they see co-creating as very important, and their main advantage of engagement is being proud to be associated with their university. So people that wore the sports jerseys and the badge of the university and went to play football or hockey or swimming or whatever, these were seen as badge wearers. They thought that the reputation of the university is extremely valuable to them, and they feel very much part of the community in a sense of belonging at their institution. They're proud to say that they're from this institution, and they wear all the merchandise that shows that they're a student of this institution. And their main motivation for engagement is to be seen to represent the university outside of academic engagement. So they weren't that too bothered about academic certificates, academic awards, but they were really bothered about representing the university for non-academic purposes. Do you want to translate that, Dr.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. मैम ने बताया था जो दूसरा है उसको बैच वेयरर्स का जो कैटेगरी में आते हैं, तो ये वो है गैर शैक्षणिक, जो कि एकेडमिक में नहीं है। ये बच्चे हैं, ये जो छात्र हैं, ये लोग पढ़ाई के इसमें ज्यादा नहीं होते, लेकिन वो लोग अपनी सेवा करना चाहते हैं खेल के द्वारा, और ये बताना चाहते हैं कि ये जिस यूनिवर्सिटी या संस्थान के ये वहां के, तो अपने आप को बहुत ज्यादा अच्छा समझते हैं कि वो इस संस्थान को बिलोंग करते हैं, हम इसके लिए करें। तो ये लोग सेवा के तौर पे ज्यादा करना चाहते हैं। उनको लगता है कि वो इस संस्थान के अंग है, और इसमें पढ़ाई के अलावा ये देखते हैं कि वो किस तरह से अपने संस्थान को रिप्रेजेंट कर पाते हैं। तो उनका जो मेन उद्देश्य रहता है कि ये उद्देश्य की किस तरह से वो खेल के द्वारा या जो भी है एक संस्थान में पढ़ाई से बाहर होके वो किस तरह से यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम ले, वो बोलेंगे हम इस यूनिवर्सिटी को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, तो उनमें उनको बहुत अच्छा सा लगता है। तो ये कैटेगरी हुआ था बैच वेयरर्स का। यस मैम, थैंक्स मैम।
Next slide, please, Dinesh. And then the third type of student body was what we call inquisitive learners. So these were students who view social interaction as the main driver for engagement. So how many students do you teach where they're constantly on the phone, on the social media network, and they've got so many friends in the network, and they've got so many followers and so many likes? These are the types of people that we would classify as inquisitive learners, that they wanted to have a big network and circle of friends and be seen to be popular. So students who view social interaction as the main driver, they're keen to discuss academic work and performance with university staff, teachers, but also like to talk about university outside of the classroom with peers, family and friends. So how many students do you know that go home and talk to the parents or the aunts and uncles or brothers and sisters or friends about what they've done in school that day or university that day? The main barrier to engagement is associated with social learners is the fear of social integration. So where they often may struggle in new situations or get anxious if they do not know where all the information is from. So they like to be organised, they like to know exactly what they're doing, they like to know what's expected of them, etc. And such students like to be prepared and have all the information to hand to avoid stress or losing confidence. So these would be classified as the inquisitive learners.
जो तीसरा कैटेगरी था इसको बोलते हैं जो जिज्ञासु के जो छात्र हैं, वो काफी उनको हर कुछ सीखने का उनको मौका लगता है, उनको अच्छा लगता है। तो ये छात्र जो है ये ज्यादा सामाजिक तौर पे ये लोग संबद्ध बनाते हैं, और ये जो भी है एकेडमिक विषय जो भी पढ़ाई करते हैं उसके विषय के बारे में चर्चा सिर्फ अपने जो स्टाफ के अलावा बाहर भी जाके दूसरे फ्रेंड्स के साथ और लोगों के साथ भी उनको शेयर करते हैं। तो इसमें ये लोग अपना संस्थान के बारे में या स्कूल के बारे में या यूनिवर्सिटी के बारे में बहुत अच्छा जो है एकेडमिक तौर पे वो बोल पाते, लेकिन वो उसी तरह पर बोल पाते जिसके लिए वो ऑलरेडी तैयार है, जिसके बारे में उनको जानकारी है। लेकिन इनका एक सबसे बड़ा ये जो बाधा है ये है कि जिसके बारे में अगर नया माहौल में रखा जाए, कुछ ऐसा खबर दी जाए जिसके या एकेडमिक तौर पे बोला जाए जिसके बारे में उनको समझ नहीं है, तब वो उसके साथ वो अपने आप को एडजस्ट नहीं कर पाते हैं, उसमें समझौता करना उनको बहुत मुश्किल रहता है। तो इसलिए ऐसे छात्र चाहते हैं कि अगर किसी भी चीज को उसको पहले ही वो तैयार रखे और सारी जानकारी उनको पहले होगा, तभी वो बहुत अच्छी तरह से कर पाएंगे, नहीं तो वो तनाव में आ जाते हैं जब एक सिचुएशन नया होता है। Yes, now I go to the next slide. Yes.
Next slide, Vanessa.
Yeah. I'm doing it for you. Pranay is out. I'm doing it, Mom. Yes.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
The next final type of groupings is that what we call societal climbers. Excuse me. And these are students who are deemed to be proactive and motivated to engage for social status and global citizen purposeship. So, we mentioned about students that wanted to be rounded and wanted to give back to society and be seen as global citizens. These are the people that we've classified as societal climbers. And they're keen to use university to make new friends and increase their social network, and they view external things like fundraising societies, volunteering, helping society as a really important part of university life. They're confident, they're outgoing, and they're not really concerned about new situations. They've got those types of outgoing personality, charisma, where that doesn't concern them. The main barriers to them engaging, though, is that societal movers and climbers that they view as important is lack of support from family. So if they don't feel supported from their family or friends, that would stop them engaging, as well as large classroom sizes. So these are people that would be classified as societal climbers.
जो चौथा है वो है जैसे सामाजिक तौर पे जो आगे बढ़ रहे हैं वैसे छात्र होते हैं। तो ये छात्र काफी इनमें काफी जोश होता है, जो सामाजिक तौर पे वो एक पूरी दुनिया की नागरिकता के तौर पे पहुंचने की उनका उद्देश्य वही रहता है। तो वो यूनिवर्सिटी या स्कूल या जो भी संस्थान है उसको प्रयोग बनाते हैं। इसमें ये नए जो दोस्त या सहपाठी या फ्रेंड्स बनाते हैं नेटवर्किंग के द्वारा, और इसके द्वारा आप कई बार देखेंगे बहुत छात्र ऐसे हैं जैसे पैसे की कमी है, वो लोग अपना पैसा कैसा भी लाके, किसी को कुछ भी तकलीफ है तो किसी से फंड बनाना है, आर्थिक स्थिति को कैसे हमें कुछ प्रोग्राम करना है, हम कैसे उसके लिए पैसा इकट्ठा करें और सेवा करना, संस्थान के लिए या समाज के लिए सेवा करना। ये लोग समाज के लिए बहुत अच्छा कुछ करते हैं और वो यूनिवर्सिटी के तौर पे यूनिवर्सिटी के द्वारा करते हैं। तो इससे ये लोग इनमें काफी अच्छी क्षमता जी, काफी कॉन्फिडेंट जाते हैं। इनको आप कोई भी नया माहौल में रखेंगे इन लोगों को तनाव नहीं होता, भी बहुत अच्छी तरह से उसमें उभर आते हैं। लेकिन इनको सिर्फ ये बाधाएं हैं कि इनका कई बार अगर इनका जो घर में परिवार से उनको कोई सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा या उनके दोस्तों से सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा या बहुत बड़ी क्लास कक्षा है जहाँ नहीं संभाल पा रहे, ये उनकी बाधाएं हैं। लेकिन इसमें ये दुनिया की नागरिकता जो है ये इनका मेन उद्देश्य। Yes, ma'am.
Next slide, please, Pranesh. So, to conclude then, what did our studies over those 3 years find then? Well, we found that student engagement is multifaceted and it's delivered by many people, not involved in education, not just academics or coaches or teachers, but it involves professional support staff as well. We recognise that the student population is diverse and they all have different views and needs from engagement. And often success with engagement is only measured in a linear way. So if you think about your institution where you work, often the bosses, the senior people in the organisation will say, well, we're really good at engagement because we have 99% of students pass our qualifications, or we've recruited 10,000 students this year, or we've awarded 100 first class degree classifications. So often it's only measured in a linear way. Where we've looked at the research that says, well, some students don't just want academic achievements, they want other things. So we need to look at engagement in a bigger picture. So if you look at students view a return on investment in many ways. So some people might find that creating a bigger network or making more friends or helping society is just as important or not even more important than academic achievement.